Good afternoon and welcome to the annual longevity panel. We've sort of have a sort of a cult following now, which is a lot of fun. And each year we do it thematically a little bit different. This year we're going to do it by example of the three people on this, and myself included, about fitness and how fitness can help us live longer, but more importantly, live better. Not that anybody could ever dream of living to 1,000, and I did not create that title myself. That title was made up for me. You know, I would have said about 120 if I could. If you can put the first slide up, please, which sort of frames I don't read National Geographic, but I do spend a lot of time in airports, and I was walking by a bookseller in, I want to say the Boston airport actually, and saw this cover of National Geographic with this beautiful baby that says this baby will live to be 120. And the fine print, which I can't read from here, says something to the extent of, and there's real science behind this. So there's so much junk science out there about living well and living longer that another part of this panel is to try and dispel it by having experts here that understand reality. So we won't be talking about any nutritional supplements this year. Let me introduce the panel, starting with slide number 2, please. Dr. Laurel is a very interesting person. Laurel was actually awarded a PCF Young Investigator Award many years ago now, which is one of the most competitive research awards that my day job foundation provides, highly competitive. Laurel received a Doctor of Science degree in epidemiology from the Harvard School of Public Health, that unbelievably beautiful building that you see up there in Boston, and is currently a faculty member there. And she has many claims to fame, but I'm just going to name 2 of them. One of them is Laurel is now the mentor to many young investigators, some of them actually funded by our Prostate Cancer Foundation, which is a testament to your leadership and your intellect. And secondly, I say with somewhat of a heavy heart, Laurel ran the Boston Marathon last week, or I guess it's the week before now, and didn't quite get to finish, unfortunately. But as she will tell you, I hope, when we turn the mic over to her in a few minutes, it doesn't dissuade her from doing it again. So that's pretty amazing. If you can go to slide number 3, please. The school I really wanted my 2 children to go to, which is UCLA. One went to Hopkins and one went to Georgetown. Gary, I just don't know what to do or say about it. But UCLA is one of the great universities, certainly one of the great medical schools in our country, if not the world. And we're fortunate to have Gary Small with us. Gary is a psychiatrist, and his day job, if you will, is geriatric psychiatry. His research is around memory retention. So by his knowledge of treating patients with Alzheimer's disease and other diseases of memory, Gary is one of the world's leading experts in this. You spent some time in Boston.
That's right.
A residency and fellowship at Mass General and Harvard, respectively, and currently is director of the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at UCLA. And Gary has many claims to fame also, but probably the most significant is that he is a Los Angeles native and an undergraduate at UCLA. And I don't know how many Los Angeles natives are in this room. Let's see, I see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a highly influential group with that many LA natives. That's fantastic. But Gary, we're looking forward to learning a lot from you today. And then finally, and certainly not least, is one of my, somebody that I met sort of incidentally when I was very sweaty and tired in Boston, Massachusetts. Harvey Spivak is the CEO of a very interesting company, a company that's truly changed my life, and we're going to have a bit more to say about that in a minute. He's the CEO of Equinox and has been since 1999. Equinox is a bit new to LA, but this is an eclectic group of people from all over the country. if you've been to New York, it's practically like a 7-Eleven. They're all over the place. They're very special health and fitness and really lifestyle clubs, which I've come to learn. There are 59 of them now around the country. Does that include London and Toronto?
I think it's 62 now.
62. So your literature is already out of date. And I'm hoping that you'll do Beijing and Shanghai pretty soon, so I don't have to breathe the bad air when I work out in those countries. Harvey holds an MBA from the University of Michigan, Go Blue, a great school that we have, through our foundations, have funded immense amounts of biomedical research, but also represents one of the great business schools of the country, of the United States. And a personal thank you, Harvey, for what you've created for our society. I think he walks the walk and he talks the talk, and there's one of his clubs, and I'm not sure which one that is. My colleague from the Milken Institute put that slide together. You probably know which one that is.
That's downtown San Francisco, the old Pacific Coast Stock Exchange.
Excellent, excellent. You can find me almost every night at around 7:30 p.m. Unfortunately, not tonight, but we have other things to do tonight. But in Marina del Rey, they're fabulous clubs. And if you go to the next slide, I just want to spend a minute talking about why Equinox is such an incredibly special place. So this guy's name is Harold Haskin. In Equinox parlance, he is a 3+ trainer, which means he's almost as good as they get. And I haven't met a 4 trainer yet, but I've heard they do exist. When I joined Equinox, and I've always been fit, so this is my bully pulpit talk before we let our colleagues speak here. I've been active my entire life, but being a reasonably well-educated person, I realized that nobody ever really taught me how to do this. So when Equinox opened, I was either the number 2 or number 3 person to sign up, and I signed up for Harold, who I met, who evaluated me, and in that year, I'm lighter by 15 pounds. I have built muscle that I'm very proud of, and just absolute tiger arms. And what I've learned in the year is that, take back an hour a day, an hour and a half a day of your life, which is a decision I had to make. In the Michael Milken universe, taking an hour and a half a day can be a complicated proposition, but you just have to do it. You put your iPhone or your BlackBerry in the glove box and you lock it, and you go in and you see Harold or somebody like Harold who teaches you how to do this right so you don't injure yourself, and the progress is exponential. So I say, hats off to Equinox, and don't forget Harold. He's our guy.
Thank you.
He's done a lot for us, and it's certainly changed my life. So let's begin with Laurel, if we could, please. You are an epidemiologist. First of all, I want you to explain to the audience what an epidemiologist does.
Okay, so we actually do not study the skin, which is what my grandmother thought for a long time, from epidermis. So we try to study patterns of disease in populations in order to understand why disease happens in individuals, why some individuals who get a disease will have a disease that progresses, and then really thinking about ways to prevent disease from happening. We can work closely with basic scientists to really get at understanding the mechanisms of disease, but that's our goal.
So one of the things that's really interesting about the Harvard School of Public Health are the bright people that came before probably all of us sitting on this stage as professionals, but people that thought that if we collect data from, let's say, every physician at Harvard University, starting in 1982.
Yeah.
Or these nurses, if we collect data from all of these nurses since
1976,
we ask them basic questions about their diet and about diseases that they received, and in some cases, and why don't you talk about that a little bit, the kinds of materials that have been collected, and just some of the studies that you've been most excited about that have to do with fitness and wellness, and because this is one of the richest cohorts in the world.
Sure. So, so there's three main studies that I do a lot of work with. As you mentioned, one is this nurses' health study that started in 1976, and over 100,000 women who are nurses were enrolled at that start of time, and they were all at that time between ages of 40 to 80. They had no existing cancer or cardiovascular disease. A parallel study is the health professionals follow-up study, which includes 50,000 men who are dentists, optometrists, veterinarians. And then the third study is the US Physicians' Health Study. And all of these individuals initially did not have any chronic diseases. And then every certain amount of time, about every 2 years, they were sent very detailed questionnaires that asked about how much physical activity they were getting, what kind of dietary factors, what foods they were eating, also things like sleep patterns, and really a whole host of factors. The goal was to look comprehensively at different risk factors that may increase a man or a woman's risk of developing a variety of chronic diseases. And they've been followed carefully over time, and for cancer, for cardiovascular disease, for mortality, and really a whole spectrum of diseases. Also within these cohorts, we have collected blood specimens, also tissue specimens and toenail specimens, so we can really get more mechanistically in studying different molecular markers in these individuals as well.
And in terms of fitness and wellness, what have you learned about physical activity in any of the studies that you've performed at Harvard?
Well, I think when you had mentioned about longevity, I think you said it exactly right. It's not just longevity, but really overall health, improving physical quality of life, lowering the risk of disability that stems from disease. So that's really, I think physical activity and fitness are key at preventing all aspects of poor health and really improving longevity. So there was a really interesting study that just came out using data from these cohorts that looked at physical fitness and how many additional years of life that can add to you. And what was really amazing to see and to quantify it that way was that the men and women who are participating in regular physical activity, which means 3.5 hours of physical activity per week, they were increasing longevity between 3 and 5 years. And another way that they talked about this, and thinking about the time you take for yourself, for each additional hour of physical activity per week that the men and women were participating in, they were increasing 5 to 11 years of life. So that 1 hour you're taking for yourself is increasing up to 11 additional hours of life for yourself. So I think we've looked at specific diseases. Physical activity, we know, lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer. There's been estimates that people who participate in just, again, it can even be brisk walking. It doesn't have to be really vigorous activity. Lower cardiovascular mortality by 60% and cancer mortality by about 25%. Yeah. So pretty dramatic improvements in health.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't push iron around Equinox, then anything that a person does to move is positive for their health. Just even walking, and that's been well documented.
Absolutely.
Well documented. So, Harvey, you have a really interesting business. It's a great business. You do a lot for society, and we thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about from a business perspective. You have to motivate people. They have to want to join. They have to show up. How do you get somebody into the gym, and how do you keep them there?
I'm feeling a lot of pressure right now. You said that we helped you lose 15 pounds. She just referred to that an hour a day adds 11 hours to your life. So I'm feeling a lot of pressure to answer that question. I do want to make one point, though, that different than 7-Eleven in New York, we don't sell Slurpees. So,
but you have nice shakes and smoothies.
I think it's important there's a slide there that just talks about our different brands, and I'll answer the question because we do look at different people different ways. And what I mean that is, we've always believed our job is inspire people and motivate people to get results. And results are quantified in very different ways, but are specific to the person. Some people it might be about longevity, some people it might be about energy, some people might be about weight loss. So there's different objectives, but we think overall our responsibility is to help people maximize life. And so if you look at what now is our growing brand portfolio, and where we have 5 brands, we do that in different ways. So our biggest brand and the brand that we talk about most, and the name of the company obviously is Equinox. And so, Howard, as you're asking, I mean, we take that responsibility to inspire and motivate people very, very seriously. We think while we're a for-profit business and we like making money, we have a responsibility to help people live a more active and healthy life. And so longevity is part of it, but also how you live those years is very, very important. And people are more focused on that today than ever before. So it's quality, not just quantity. And so we do that by providing what we think is a unique experience. And experience is a word that is often misused, but for us, it has many different aspects. So it starts with how we design our facilities, because we want to create an inspiring and upbeat environment. So we use different designers, internationally recognized designers. Each club is designed differently, even though they're part of a family portrait. And Howard, you just asked me, before you were commenting about how you like the Boston Club a little bit more. Well, that's what starts happening. And so we hit different people a different way emotionally. But then there's a service level. But most importantly, at the core of what we do is the programming. And so it's really featuring the highest level of expertise, whether it's in one of the classes we offer, and most of our clubs have anywhere from 4 to 5 different studios offering general group fitness classes to specialized programs like Pilates and yoga, and what we will say is the best of the best in those areas, different ways. But then it's our personal trainers, and you had a phenomenal experience with one of our best, a T3 plus trainer. And what Harold does is something that we do with great success around the country. We have, as a company, almost 2,000 personal trainers. And what we've recognized in an industry which is a very mom and pop industry, while we require all of our trainers to have a baseline certification or education from an accredited program, we find that is table stakes. And so what we have is our own proprietary education program. And so we're constantly educating our trainers to not just advance the level of experience, but be most progressive in how they think about training our members. So today, and there was an article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, that what's starting to happen with great speed and great urgency is a lot more what we call functional training or body weight training. The use of the standard selectorized piece of equipment, those pieces of equipment you see in a traditional gym, are really falling by the wayside very quickly. And what you now see is a lot more around kettlebells, which we've been using for years, introduced them back in the States, and something we call Viper, which is something that we've done. Yes. But what you're seeing is lots of, you've played with the Vipers, which are long rubber tubes.
Straps.
TRX straps, balls, boards, jump ropes, all these different, what I'll call toys and accessories, is what you're seeing more and more of. And so it's our responsibility to educate our trainers to how to use those so they can help you and get that experience to achieve your desired results. So that's how we think about Equinox. Then we're going to talk about SoulCycle. SoulCycle, the press speaks very highly of SoulCycle. If you live in New York or LA or pass through those markets, you've probably heard about SoulCycle. It's probably the hottest cardio party in the country. Big celeb following like Equinox. But what's different is SoulCycle is really catering to a more boutique experience. So where Equinox is full service, let's call it 30 to 40,000 square feet in size. SoulCycle is 3,000 square feet, and it's just about studio cycling or spinning, as many of you might know. But it's done with rock star instructors, high energy, and a soulful environment. It's got a cult-like following. We, at noon on Mondays, post a schedule online, and by 12:05, all the classes are sold out. We literally cannot satisfy demand. So what we're doing is, so you're nodding your heads, so some people in this room may have seen that experience. I apologize for that, but it's been a fun ride for us, no pun intended. But the point I'm making is, in answering your question, is Equinox is someone who wants a more full-service experience. SoulCycle, also an upscale offering catering to the same demographic, but someone who wants more boutique experience and a very specialized experience. And then, without going into all of our brands, I just want to point out we have another brand that we started about a year and a half ago, is called Blink. And so what we saw is there's 3 real reasons why people don't belong to health clubs, and there's lots of research on this. They don't know how, they can't afford, or they're intimidated. And so while we talk about Equinox having this great success, Equinox is 250,000 members. It's the upscale. Same thing with SoulCycle. But the rest of the country, the rest of the world, who are becoming more aware of the benefits of living a healthy lifestyle, whether through medical research or just picking up the newspaper or magazine, every day there's another article. Everything points to disease prevention, longevity, all these different trends. And so what we did is we created a brand that goes and challenges those three issues, and it's something that's very accessible. So Blink, where we have 15 in tri-state New York, is $20 a month. So it's a very different concept. It's basically redefining the basic gym, but something that we're really proud of. And we're going into places like the Bronx and Staten Island and parts of lower income areas of Long Island, New Jersey, where Equinox would never show up, but Blink is catering to that population as well.
Fantastic. And how about your personal routine?
Well, Howard asked me to work out with him today, so I'm a little embarrassed. I'm walking around with this very fancy gym bag. I flew in this morning from New York, and I will later on today get a quick run in at one of our clubs. But I train typically 4 to 5 times a week. I practice what I preach. A lot of that's around eating, a lot of that's around training. I train with a T4 coach. I'll introduce you to mine. A couple of times a week, and then I do a fair amount of cardio, but it's all in balance. Sure. But one thing I will just relate to my own personal experience. I've always had access, doing this for 15 years, to some of the best professionals around. But about a year and a half ago, after coming off a rotator cuff surgery, I decided to change some of my behavior, and some of that was around eating. And Howard, when you and I were talking a couple, 4 or 5 weeks ago about the panel today, you asked, talk a little bit about your own experience, talk about what you do. And I will tell you, by changing my eating and my training routine, my energy, which has always been very high, shot through the roof, and my clarity is better than it's ever been. So I will tell you, especially with the powerful group that I'm sitting in front of, by embracing whatever works for you, but an active routine, an engaged routine, and really thinking about it in a more holistic way, you have a great opportunity to change your performance and change your results, whatever you desire those to be. It could be in your professional life, it could be in your personal life, it could be in your relationship with your family, with your friends, with your children, but it really does make a big difference. And so I'm very passionate about what I do professionally, but I also embrace it personally. And yes, I will be on a treadmill later today in our new club downtown LA, just to experience that myself.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Gary, you have a really hard job. I mean, when I think about, I interact with physicians in so many different, that take care of so many different maladies, if you will. There are two that I find extraordinarily tough. One is pediatric cancer. Just a kid with cancer is just a really tough thing. And the second is memory loss, Alzheimer's, the other diseases that you're an expert on. You've had a lot of experience. You must have taken care of thousands of these patients. What have you learned about the lifestyle that people live and the retention of memory throughout life?
And I only have 5 minutes?
You have time. You have time. We want to learn from you.
Well, it's been an interesting journey for me. And people tend to think of geriatric psychiatry, old age, as a depressing, negative kind of experience. For me, it's been very positive. And in fact, my work has focused on the positive, how we can empower people, how we can help them. And as I listened to the panel, I mean, so much of what you're all saying rings true in our research. For example, if we can go to the slide on which numbers? I didn't memorize the numbers. Okay, extreme longevity. If we can
Number
go to that,
6,
Number
please.
6. Now, this is kind of relevant to the discussion here because there are clusters of centenarians. These are people that have lived to be 100, not to 1,000, although I don't think there are many clusters of those. But you find them in certain areas of the world. You might have heard about this from the internet. I think they talk about blue zones and so forth. I've got a few of them here. Sardinia, Italy. Okinawa, Japan. Not far from here, Loma Linda, California.
Really?
And what's interesting about these areas is that there are common traits of the people. I mean, they are physically active. They're socially connected. In Sardinia, they probably sit around and sip their cappuccino or their wine, and they talk to each other. And then they have a diet that is rich in antioxidant fruits and vegetables, healthy grains, and proteins. So first of all, this kind of observation is not proof that if you decide to move to Sardinia that you're going to live to be 100. I cannot guarantee that. But there are other studies, large epidemiological studies that show these trends. And what's interesting, we're hearing, it's not just about physical fitness. Although, if you're going to choose to do something, exercise is number one when it comes to protecting your brain. People ask me, well, Dr. Small, should I do crosswords? I only have 10 minutes. Should I do a crossword or should I, walk briskly around the block? I say walk briskly around the block, because if you do crosswords, you may only get better at doing crosswords. But if you walk briskly around the block, you're going to help prevent prostate cancer, you're going to prevent cardiovascular disease, diabetes, so forth and so on. And also, when you walk briskly around the block, please don't do your crossword at the same time because you might you might hit your head, and that is not good for your brain. We've been studying that as well. So, what we found in the kinds of studies we've done, that when we combine these kinds of activities, physical exercise, healthy diet, stress management, staying socially connected, and learning memory techniques, it has a big impact. The kind of testimonials you're hearing from the panel, it really does work. When we study it scientifically, we find that people improve very quickly, their brain wiring changes very quickly, and the long-term studies show tremendous benefits. So, I think it is devastating when people get Alzheimer's disease. I think we're not going to really have time to talk about that, how we deal with that and those kinds of issues. In our research, we're all about prevention. We're about trying to protect a healthy brain rather than trying to repair damage once it sets in. We think this is a much more efficient strategy. So we can go through my slides. I can keep talking about this.
I'm interested in really what is it about exercise, do you think?
Well, I want to answer that, but I just remembered something. You reminded me of something I wanted to comment on that Harvey mentioned, and it's really a challenge for us. How do you get people to change? How do you motivate them to change? Because we have a lot of programs. My wife and I, we've written 6 books on this. UCLA, we have a memory fitness program. We've got a brain boot camp. You name it, we've got a program, and we're trying to help people to change. And I think one of the things that really gets people, and this is how our brains are wired, our default mode is make me feel better right away, okay? So probably what you're doing in your facilities, people are coming in, they see that, they feel better.
May I comment on that?
Sure.
Harvey uses a lot of sex appeal too. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. The fact of the matter is, when you're in Equinox, the art, the websites, the way Equinox presents itself makes you feel pretty.
That's number
one.
That's
a good thing.
Okay. So it brings you in. But the other thing that happens, you start, and this gets to your other question, you get your heart pumping oxygen and nutrients to your brain cells. You've got endorphins surging through your body. What are endorphins? I mean, they're the body's natural antidepressant, and it lifts your mood. They're analgesics. You have an anti-inflammatory response that goes through your body. One of the problems with aging is our inflammatory system kind of ratchets up into high gear. Now, so inflammation is good. If you sprain your ankle, you get an infection, there are these little inflammatory cells that start repairing your body. But as you age, that system is in high gear, and those inflammatory cells actually attack healthy tissue. If you look inside the brain of an Alzheimer victim, you see evidence of inflammation in the brain. So all this good stuff is happening. You leave, and also, by the way, your body secretes something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which gets your brain cells to sprout branches. The dendrites start talking to each other better. So you're thinking clearly, you're mentally alert, you're kind of high. I mean, this guy he's like a drug dealer. He's fixing you. You get out of there and you're feeling great. And you know what? You want to come back. And that's what it's about. It's not just about doing it once. You've got to, as Laurel said, you've got to kind of keep doing this to see an effect. It's not just one day to really affect prevention of disease. So I think that's the number one, is because people aren't thinking, geez, I want to live to be 120. I mean, maybe the people here are, but most people aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about feeling better right away.
Yeah, and you really don't feel better right away. I mean,
I do. Maybe you got the wrong trainer.
No, no, he went really easy on me at first, but there was still a lot of lactic acid deposited in long muscles, and one of the things that motivates me to keep coming back is if I can't even go 2 days without it because of the fear of that pain, because the memory is so current. So anyway, so what can you really believe in this? And what is there scientific evidence yet, or even low-level scientific
clearly,
evidence?
I mean, if we can go to the next slide. By the way, I do this at the dinner table with my kids. I say they love it. But there is scientific evidence from animal studies. You take small animals and you have them exercise. Rusty Gage down in Salk Institute showed this many years ago. They actually have bigger brains. They have more cells in the hippocampal memory centers underneath the temples, and you put them in their mazes, they don't get lost. Wonderful studies that Arthur Kramer did at the University of Illinois, where he takes older people, puts them on a walking program, compares them to stretching and toning. The walkers have better attention, they have better memory, they have bigger brains. And a bigger brain is a better brain. So if somebody calls you a fathead, it's actually a compliment. And so there's a lot of different, there's epidemiological evidence. It's very strong that cardiovascular conditioning is really helpful for your brain health. And just 90 minutes a week is associated with a lower risk for Alzheimer's disease.
Wow, well, I beat that one.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So Lorelei, you walk the walk and talk the talk. You're a marathon runner, or you're beginning, and you're also a great scientist. I'm curious to get to get a little bit more granular about some of the epidemiology that you've done on physical activity and cancer progression.
Sure. So in the United States now, there are 14 million men and women who are cancer survivors. And those individuals face a whole host of challenges with their health, both because of their cancer as well as some of the treatments they're receiving. And so one of the projects that we've been working on is the majority of my research is focused on prostate cancer. And so we've been interested in seeing whether if you could get men soon after they're diagnosed with prostate cancer into a physical activity program, could that improve their overall health? And there's some really good epidemiological data to suggest this is so, not only for prostate cancer, but for colon cancer and breast cancer, that after a cancer diagnosis, no matter what you did in terms of physical activity before cancer diagnosis, that if you can engage in physical activity, you can improve cancer-specific survival. Epidemiological studies can be challenging because you're just observing people, and so if they're doing more physical activity, they're probably smoking less and eating a better diet. So we oftentimes you really need that next step of scientific evidence, which is a randomized trial where you can randomize people to one factor or another. So what we've been doing is to enroll men soon after they're diagnosed with prostate cancer into a group walking intervention. And then following them, so far with our initial pilot study, we followed the men for 4 months. And it was remarkable to see what effects we could see in the group of men randomized to the group walking intervention. So first of all, just in thinking about getting men to participate in physical activity, this study was actually undertaken in Sweden, and the average age of the men was about 67. And thinking about trying to affect change of a group of men at that age could be challenging. The men on the walking intervention, they loved this program. They would walk together as a team once a week, and then they'd walk on their own. We'd ask them to maintain 10,000 steps a day. And on average, these men were walking about 12,000 steps per day. And they said actually being part of a team was so important.
That's my goal.
Is it? Yeah. Being part of a team was so important because they felt like if they didn't get out there walking, on the other days they weren't with their team, they were letting their team members down. So actually, in thinking about physical activity and change, I think the group environment, and I think probably in a gym, you're also part of a group, you're part of a team. As well. So they adhered to the physical activity. We saw amazing reductions after just a short time in their blood pressure went down substantially. We saw improvements in levels of cholesterol, levels of some inflammatory mediators, and then also we asked them about their quality of life. And men with prostate cancer suffer considerably from a lot of different types of physical quality of life, and they showed really a marked improvement in a number of different areas. And then also just emotional quality of life as well. They reported better sleep after the end of the intervention, and also some different aspects around depression. So really, if you think about a factor that can change and influence a man his global health, I mean, this physical activity data are really remarkable.
They are. And in fact, we'd like to see a global walking program. Yeah. I'm glad you said 12,000 steps. I use a Fitbit, and Harvey uses a Jawbone. They do basically the same thing for fitness nerds like the two of us definitely are. You can program this through your iPhone or your PC to set goals of numbers of steps per day, numbers of flights of stairs that you walk. You can tell it what you eat. I don't have the patience to do that, because it will calculate the calories you burn and balance it against what you eat. And the Jawbone's a little bit more friendly to sleep with. This has a wristband, and it'll actually tell you how deep your sleep is, and it'll give you a report in the morning of your sleeping patterns. So if you need something to motivate you just a little bit, this works really well.
What's it called again?
Well, this is a Fitbit, and that is made by Jawbone.
It's called Upband.
Upband,
A band?
yes. And there are others.
Yes.
There are others. These are just two. This little guy has a little clip. You can just throw it in your pocket. It's pretty simple. It knows when you're walking, and it knows when you're climbing stairs. Okay. So, Gary, I think, people underestimate the disease burden caused by an inactive lifestyle. And you don't have to be around this place very long to hear Michael Milken, and the Institute has published, Ross Duvall has published on this, the burden of disease due to bad lifestyle choices, inactivity, being overweight or obese. I mean, it's really clear that it's costing our society immense amounts of resources in taking care of patients with diabetes, with heart attack, with stroke, probably with memory disorders as well. And I kind of know I know a lot about cancer. I know a lot less about Alzheimer's. How big is the problem? And is it growing? Is it receding? What can we do about it?
It's a huge problem. So you've got 5.2 million people in the U.S. with Alzheimer's today. That number is probably going to triple in the next by 2050.
Due to demographics?
Yeah, because age is the single greatest risk factor, and people are living longer. If you were born in 1900, you'd be lucky if you lived to be 50. If you're born today, you're probably going to live to be 80. And the risk for Alzheimer's disease for people 65 or older is about 10%. For people 85 or older, it's about 50%. So, worldwide, there's about 34 million people with Alzheimer's, and we've looked at this. A recent study from UC San Francisco estimated, they looked at modifiable risk factors, things we've been talking about, physical inactivity, not eating right, smoking, being overweight, and so forth. They attribute about half of all cases to modifiable risk factors. So about 6 million cases in the U.S. are potentially modifiable. So, it's really a tremendous problem. It's really a tremendous frustration, because we do have, I think, enough scientific evidence to tell us that this stuff is good for you, but we get pushback. I mean, for example, there was an NIH consensus conference a couple of years ago that did a meta-analysis of all the studies, and they concluded you cannot prevent Alzheimer's disease. That's the headline, right? But, if you look at the fine print, it's problematic, because they did find encouraging data. And I would admit, we don't have a Framingham-like study that absolutely proves that you can prevent Alzheimer's. But you know something, I don't want to wait 20 years for somebody to come back and say, hey, Gary, you should have been walking
Exactly.
more, you should have been eating right. So I think it's really a dilemma that it's a challenge because what kind of data do we need to influence policymakers, to get people to change and to really do something, to force them to join Equinox or to join Blink or to do something that really makes a difference in their lives. I know Bloomberg didn't have much success in limiting the size of Coca-Cola drinks, but what else can we do to help people to change?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost an, a from birth to, to grave sort of thing. And Harvey, this probably applies to you, but I mean, what do we do about children in our society who are, getting larger and larger, especially in the underserved communities? I know at your clubs on Saturday mornings sometimes there are programs in the, in the group room where people bring their children and dance around and jump on balls and things. But I mean, as a father, what do you do for your kids? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still, not just because the kids can't make the decisions, I think it still all comes back to us as the adults and the parents. I mean, the more we could better understand, first and foremost for ourselves, how living a healthy lifestyle benefits us, and not just in daily life, and that's probably first and foremost, but in all the things the panel is talking about from a disease prevention and a longevity perspective, it starts there. So I know for our children, my wife is very active in the lifestyle that I've referred to and I've talked about. I mean, obviously an Equinox member, we'd have problems if she wasn't, but nonetheless. But it's also how we eat at home. And so I have a very blessed father. I have twin 6-year-olds, identical girls, and since they were born, they've been eating differently. Now, I'm not telling you we're just serving them Brussels sprouts. They have dessert like any old kid, and they have their chocolate and all that kind of fun stuff. But it's more limited. It's at times it might be organic or it might be local. So we're making different food decisions for them, putting different things on their plate, and so they don't know differently. Now, they're getting to an age where their friends are showing them, but they still are now smarter, and they talk about eating healthy. So they will say to my wife or myself, am I eating healthy? So I know when I grew up, I drank, chocolate milk, and, my breakfast on the way to school was a Pop-Tart. I mean, that was kind of a healthy choice. My daughters don't know anything but drinking water every day. They don't even drink juice. And I don't think we're extreme in that. I think it's that because we understand the benefits, they don't know any better. That's what they ask for. They're happy, they're healthy, they're thriving in school. And so I think it's once again, it starts with us as adults taking responsibility for ourselves, better understanding how we live a healthy lifestyle. And once you start understanding that and embracing that, that's what's going to start impacting the children. Until that happens, we're going to have an uphill battle with the kids.
So I just want to jump in here because in thinking about kids and age issues, we just did a study on this, which was really quite interesting. We collaborated with Gallup Poll. We got Gallup organization to ask people about memory, but also they look at lifestyle choices and behaviors. So they have data on living healthy lifestyle, like eating right, physical activity, and so forth. So, I mean, before I tell you the results, I'm just curious, you guys are pretty smart out there. What would you think? Do you think that older people are more likely to eat right and to exercise, or younger people? How many think that younger people have a healthier lifestyle? See all these young people at Equinox working out? How many people think older people? Okay. So you kind of erred on the older side. You guys were right. It was the most significant part of the study. We had about 18,000 people, completely representative sample from throughout the United States. As people get older, they're more likely to eat fruits and vegetables, they're more likely to be physically active, and so forth, and they're more likely not to be overweight. And why would that be? Well, if you smoke and drink and eat too much when you're young, you don't live long enough to get Gallup Poll to phone you when you're old. And the other thing is, when you're young, you're experience the immediate consequences of unhealthy behavior. You just get up the next day, it doesn't bother you. But when you get older, you can't tolerate it as much. And your doctor is saying, you got to start, eating right. You got to start doing this if you don't want to have another heart attack or something like that. So I thought it's interesting that as we get older, we're more likely to be healthy. But it's so important that you're teaching. I think many of us are teaching our kids to do the right thing. It's easier if you start the behaviors young, because it's hard for people to change.
Completely agree. I mean, I know my wife is literally battling with our local school where our children go, because every day there's another birthday celebration, which just means
More
license
cake.
for sweets.
Yeah.
And because our girls have not had a lot, they have sugar, but they have not had a lot. It's almost alarming what you see with a child, just doing it yourself, when they don't have sugar and then all of a sudden you pump sugar into them, do a cupcake. I mean, what happens to their personality? It really is alarming. So when you do that every day in school, it's a problem. But there are so many parents that aren't educated enough or resist that change because they think they're depriving the children. It's the complete opposite. They're hurting the children, and if they start just shifting, it's a shift. It's not an extreme. The difference is remarkable.
But we're the exception, because if you look at the data, I mean, you talk about childhood obesity, kids are getting diabetes at a young age, and it's a problem with the economy. I was at a meeting, actually when I was in Boston when there was a lockdown after the marathon. I happened to be at a nutritional meeting there, and there was a very interesting presentation from a guy up at University of Washington, where he looked at the patterns of obesity according to supermarkets or different kinds of markets. And he found, the people who go to Whole Foods, there's less obesity. People who go to, Safeway, there's more obesity, because they can't. They're getting the Pop-Tarts in general, not completely. I mean, look.
Safeway is just an example that it wasn't a part of the study.
No, but just in terms of the demographic, not entirely, because because the smart shoppers will go to Safeway and they'll buy, the products that they need at a lower rate. But it's a little bit about branding. The people who go to Whole Foods, they kind of see themselves as the healthier kind of person, just like vegetarian. How many of us are vegetarians? Not many? This is great. I mean, I'm not a vegetarian either, but there seems to be a big trend. I mean, I was just down in Cabo, and on the menu, they had, this is vegetarian, this is vegan. I mean, in LA, a lot of people are going vegan. And in general, people who are vegetarians, they tend to be healthier because they're just more fastidious. They tend to exercise. And these kinds of behaviors go together. In the Gallup poll study, we found that there was an additive effect. If you ate fruits and vegetables, you had like a 44% chance of having a better memory. If you did that plus exercise, it was like 85%. If you did 4 healthy lifestyles, it was 110%. So, there's sort of a cluster of healthy behaviors that go together.
So let's go back to Safeway for just a minute here.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said Safeway. I should have said another.
It's okay.
market.
It's okay. It's endemic, but I think it's noteworthy that of all of the grocery businesses that I know, and I think I probably know them all because of where I work, Safeway, and through the leadership of their former CEO, Stephen Bird, have been the single most responsible company to their employees in terms of healthcare incentives. And, this is a free world. If you're going to smoke cigarettes, we can't fire you, we won't fire you, but you're going to pay more for your health insurance. And by the way, we'll help you get off cigarettes. And the same thing for weight control, the same thing for exercise plans, the same thing for everything preventative in medicine that is available. So I just wanted to put that little disclaimer in there.
Well, I think the point was if the food is less expensive, the people who can't afford it will go there and they'll buy the chips and the crackers, the refined sugars, the processed foods that might increase their risk for type 2 diabetes,
Sure.
obesity, and so forth.
So does everybody know the trick about how to avoid that in any grocery store? And I learned this from Steve Bird. You shop around the perimeter of the store. Beware of anything interior. That's where the gluten, the carbohydrates, the empty carbohydrates, the sugar-containing foods are. Just outside. And that even goes for Whole Foods as well. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. We have an opportunity, perhaps people in the audience might have questions, and we do have microphones, and I'm glad to see some hands going up. We have a mic that'll be coming around to you.
Question for Dr. Small. I saw that you'd done research on brain injury as it affects memory, and I have a close friend who, my age, but he fell down a stairway and now has short-term memory, and I know there's possibly there's linkage with Alzheimer's, but more importantly, what, if anything, can somebody do in that situation? Are there experimental medications? Because a neurologist in a Midwest city isn't going to have a lot of tools in their toolbox.
So we just did a study of NFL retirees, and we invented the first and only brain scan technology that can show the physical evidence of Alzheimer's in living people. And when we did these brain scans, we saw the tau deposits that you see in Alzheimer's disease. And there was a correlation between the number of concussions that the player experienced and the amount of tau in their brain. So it wasn't 100%. There was one of the players, a guy who played for the the Chargers for a number of years, had a few concussions and had a lot of tau in his brain, and he was okay. He didn't have a cognitive problem. So it's not just the tau that collects. There's genetic factors. Who knows? There could be steroid exposure. There could be a lot of different factors. Now, to get to your question, right now we don't have a lot of specific treatments either for Alzheimer's that are curative. They're really only symptomatic treatments, and the same thing for traumatic brain injury. We're trying to use this tool to develop them while we're waiting for science to catch up. The same kinds of lifestyle strategies that we're talking about here, nutrition, physical exercise, stress management, all that, learning memory techniques. My latest book, Alzheimer's Prevention Program, I'd recommend that. Those are the kinds of things that we think can probably help people who've had brain injury.
An Alzheimer's specific question. What is the
Why don't you give them the microphone?
Need the microphone,
What is
please.
the efficacy of stem cells without talking about the morality on Alzheimer's disease?
So
What is the efficacy of stem cells?
So stem cells with Alzheimer's, we don't know if there's efficacy. It hasn't been tested yet. I think that there is a potential there. I mean, stem cells, basically, you're taking undifferentiated cells and growing them into certain cell lines. And we know there are several cell lines that are getting messed up in Alzheimer's, the cholinergic cells, dopaminergic cells, noradrenergic cells. So I think that's a technology that eventually will pay off, but I see that way down the road. Right now, I see a much better potential. We heard, I think Laurel mentioned some of the inflammatory markers. I think that's critically important in Alzheimer's. So I think looking at anti-inflammatory strategies at the right point in time, that may be a payoff. Looking at anti-tau. Right now, the big prevention trials are going after amyloid. The pharmaceutical companies have invested in that a tremendous amount of money and time. I'm not sure it's going to pay off, but it's worth testing.
I have a question on supplements and vitamins. How
Yeah.
does that fit into the longevity discussion?
Well, I can just comment. Let me just comment, because I think you kind of dismissed that earlier, Howard, and I think
Omega-3, maybe not omega-3.
Well, I think that we need to learn more about it. I mean, how many of us here are taking supplements? Probably a lot of people. So people take them based on testimonials. The issue is with supplements, you don't need a double-blind placebo-controlled study, which means to really see if something works, you got to give some people an inactive placebo, you got to give some people the substance, and you got to test it. Now we're doing some tests on that. We're looking at pomegranate extract. We're looking at curcumin, which is an anti-inflammatory. It's in turmeric and curry. But I think I want to see the results of those kinds of studies. There have been some that have been tested where you see some benefits. So I think it's not. I'm an agnostic when it comes to science.
Go ahead, Laurel.
No, I was just going to say, so I think there's an ongoing study, a randomized trial right now looking at omega-3 and vitamin D.
Vitamin D
I think
is
vitamin
another
D
one.
is also going to be, there's a lot of epidemiological data for a broad range of health outcomes. I really think, though, to disentangle the supplements from the actual whole foods, you can't do it. You really need to think about whole foods. There was a recent publication a randomized study of several thousand individuals in Spain where they randomized them to the Mediterranean diet with or without olive oil or nuts and the usual diet. And there was whether it was Mediterranean diet with extra olive oil or nuts, a 30% lower risk of cardiovascular disease after 5 years of follow-up. In fact, they stopped the study early.
That's
So
the Mediterranean diet.
the Mediterranean
With or without
diet.
olive oil.
Exactly. So with extra olive oil or with nuts. And so I think thinking about, I think really a lot of research now is thinking about the whole food and its role in preventing health outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, every clinical trial in oncology, I can't speak for your discipline, but all of the randomized trials, so some people got it and some people got a sugar pill, versus, of vitamin E, of selenium, what else was there, Laurel? Lycopene, a bunch of these supplements.
Beta-carotene.
Beta-carotene, a number of these supplements that looked like there was a signal from the epidemiology study, looking back into the archives of observational data. When it was done prospectively, they were negative.
Yeah.
And we spent a fortune on that. I mean, the federal government spent a fortune on that.
I have a question on Alzheimer's. I know a patient that is on a test program, intravenous, twice a week. It appears that it has arrested the development of Alzheimer's. He's been on for 2 years. Can you elaborate on your knowledge on this type of drug regimen and what's your professional projection of the outcome?
So do you know which drug
No,
it is?
no, I don't.
So there's two that it might be. There have been monoclonal antibodies that are given as infusions, and those go after the amyloid plaques. So Alzheimer's disease, you have two abnormal protein deposits in the brain in areas that control memory and thinking. Plaques and tangles, amyloid plaques and tau tangles. So now they're really investing in going after the plaques. It could be that.
Right.
Okay. Now, the companies that have invested in that, most of the trials have been negative, but there's one monoclonal antibody where they saw a signal in people with mild Alzheimer's disease. As a result of that, now they're doing prevention trials. So they're going after people. There are families in Colombia that have the Alzheimer's genetic mutation. So you know that 50%, if you have that gene, you're going to get the disease. And what they're doing, they're giving them the monoclonal antibodies. So it could be that. This could work early on. I don't know, but I'm waiting to see the results. The other kind of thing that's injected are IgG. It's kind of an immune treatment, immunoglobulin treatment. And there's a guy at Cornell, Norm Relkin, has been a big champion of this. And he's been he's a very good scientist, a neurologist, and the absolute results of that we haven't seen yet, so that might be what it is as well. Yeah. So those are, there may be something to this.
Question right there.
Many of us that care for aging parents notice, at least I've noticed a phenomenon where you go from living to waiting to die.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if anybody has any comments, and when you see that in a parent or a loved one, steps or any drugs or anything that possibly gets them to think that they're alive again in any capacity or want to live again while they're.
So this is a tough one. I kind of live and breathe this in my practice, and now I'm living and breathing it with my parents and in-laws. And it's, there's no absolute answer. It's really a challenge. What we do at UCLA, for example, we take all of our programs. So if we take something like my book, The Alzheimer's Prevention Program, what we'll do, somebody comes in, we do a medical assessment, but we take those prevention strategies, which are basically what we're talking about here, physical exercise, diet, and so forth, and we kind of tailor it for that person's level of cognitive decline or whatever they may have. So, if you want to do mental exercise and you're already got dementia, you can't do really tough things. You've got to make it easier, and you've got to kind of tailor it for that individual. That's really kind of the basic strategy. I don't know if others have some ideas on that.
I mean, this is a medical question, so I'm going to say.
I don't think it's never too late to
Right.
get up and move.
Right.
Right.
You know, that's what I've done with an ill in-law. You know, it's never too late to get up and move. If they're capable of being ambulatory and walking, get them up to walk.
So one of, I often tell people that, this is the triple threat against Alzheimer's disease. Take a walk with a friend. You're going to get physical cardiovascular exercise. You're going to talk, which actually exercises your brain cells, the interaction. And if you talk about things that are bothering you, you're going to lower your stress level.
That's great. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Gary.
Good job.
Lorelei, thank you.